All right, so today we're going to use greatest common factors. Greatest common factors are something we've learned in the past in kind of a more basic way. So here's what we know from previous math courses in middle school and possibly even late elementary. If I give you two numbers such as, let's say, how about 20 and 36? And we say, what is the greatest common factor between the two numbers? Well, the factors of 20 are 1 times 20, so numbers that multiply to get to 20, 2 times 10, and 4 times 5. So think about the factors of 36. 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, and 6 times 6. So those are all the factors of 36. So the greatest common factor just means the largest one they have in common. So both of these have a factor of 4. They also both have a factor of 2, but you want the greatest one. So the greatest common factor is 4. Okay, so we're going to use GCFs to factor these polynomials, okay? So this first polynomial, 4x minus 6. So you're going to sit here and you're going to say, what is the greatest common factor between 4x and 6? So what goes into both of those is 2. So I'm just going to write down here the GCF is 2. So our answer is going to have a 2 on the outside. I'm factoring it out, which is kind of like dividing. You're undoing the distributive property. So if you divide by 2, 4x divided by 2 is 2x. And then over here you have a minus 6, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And that's our answer in factored form. So to check yourself, if you look at distributing, if you distribute the 2 back in, 2 times 2x is 4x, and 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And that was our problem, was 4x minus 6. So I feel confident we did it correctly. Let's try another one. So on example 2, once again, I suggest you just go ahead and figure out what the GCF is and write that out to the side. So first I look at the numbers, 5 and 30. The GCF, the largest number that divides into both 5 and 30, is 5. Now this one's different because it has variables. So you see it has an x squared right here and an x right here. So the greatest thing they have in common is an x. You can't put that they both have an x squared because that's too large. If you look at the 30 doesn't have an x squared, it has an x. So when I look for the variable, that's where it gets a little weird. I look for the lower power of the variables because I know they both have that. So my GCF is 5x. That's what I'm going to pull out in front. So that's what I'm going to divide by. So I'm just going to write divide by 5x, divide by 5x. I need to see it personally to be able to get a clear picture of what's happening. So 5 divided by 5 is 1, and x squared divided by x is x. So it's 1x. So look at this. X squared divided by x, call that x to the 1. The quotient property back in chapter 6 is we subtract them. We go 2 minus 1, and that's why it's x to the 1 or just x. So now negative 30 divided by 5 is going to be minus 6, and then x divided by x is 1, so we don't have to write it. So it's a minus 6 right there. So that's our solution is 5x times x minus 6. That's the factored form. So you don't want to multiply it because you're undoing the multiplication right now. That would just lead you back to your answer. When I multiply it in my head, it's just to check and make sure I did it correctly. So 5 times x is 5x squared. So that's what I started with. That's good. And 5 times negative 6 is negative 30x. So it checks out that I did a good job. Okay, what would be the greatest common factor, the GCF, of example 3? All right, so in the 6 and the 21, a 3 can go into both. So the GCF is going to start with a 3. And then the lowest power of the variables is just x. So it's going to be 3x. So I divide each thing by 3x. All right, so I have 6 divided by 3. And let's see here, that's 2. And x squared divided by x is x. So it's 2x. Negative 21 divided by 3 is a negative 7. And then the x's make 1, so you don't have to write them. So it's 2x minus 7. So if we multiply just to see, did we do okay? 3x times 2x is 6x squared. That's totally what we had in the problem. And 3x times negative 7 is negative 21x. So we did really well. All right, so the GCF on example 4, if you look at it, the GCF, there's nothing that divides into both 5 and 2 other than 1. So the GCF is 1, and then the most between the x cubed and the x squared, you go for the lowest power, which is x squared. So the GCF, you don't have to write the 1, so it's just x squared. So we're going to put x squared outside the parentheses, and I'm going to write divide by x squared. You can even write divide by 1x squared if it helps you. So let's look at this. 5 divided by 1 is 5. And then x cubed divided by x squared, remember you subtract the powers and you get x to the 1 or just x. So you get 5x. And then 2 divided by 1 is still 2. And then x squared divided by x squared is 1. So they essentially cancel out to 1. So my answer is x squared times 5x plus 2. Okay, what would be the GCF in example 5? All right, the GCF between 12 and 8 would be 4. And then you pick your lowest power. So between x squared and x to the 5th, the lowest one is x squared. So we're going to write 4x squared out to the side. So if you divide by or factor out 4x squared, what is left in this parentheses right here? All right, so 12 divided by 4 would be 3. And then the x squared simplified to 1. So it's just x squared over x squared cancels out. But the reason it happens is because it makes a 1. That's why. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. And then x to the 5th divided by x squared. Remember, you subtract the powers. 5 minus 2 is 3. So it's x to the 3rd. And that would be our solution. Okay, look at the right half over here. This is the same type of problem except it asks you to solve. So it wants us to solve and you see it equals 0. So the key is it must equal 0 to solve. You have to get it equal to 0 first. So it's equal to 0. Okay, so now I'm going to put equal to 0 with a question mark. So factor, set each factor equal to 0, and solve. So these are kind of our steps right here that I'm going to continue to follow. So it's already equal to 0. So when we factor out the greatest common factor. So our greatest common factor here is just 1x or just x. So if I pull out a 1x or an x, then let's figure out what's left inside. 4 divided by 1 is 4. X squared divided by x is x. And then over here we have negative x. Let's call that negative 1x. That just helps me. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 is negative 1. And x over x cancels out. So this is my factored form. So each of these are factors. This x is a factor, and this 4x minus 1 is a factor. So it says set each factor equal to 0. Okay, we did that, and then it says solve. So this x equals 0 is solved. So over here, we're going to need to solve for x, and so I get 1/4. So my answers are 0 and 1/4. Okay, that's what we're learning today. Let's try several more just to make sure we've got this. So example 7, remember step 1 said, is it equal to 0? It is, so we're ready for step 2. Step 2 says to factor. What's the GCF of 10x plus 25x squared? All right, it would be 5x. So that's what we're going to factor out. So I'm going to have, let me switch here, a 5x factored out of all of this 10x plus 25x squared. That's what I'm factoring out of. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. The x's cancel out. 25 divided by 5 is 5. It's positive, so I put a plus. X squared divided by x is x. Okay, that's my factored form. Step 3 says set each factor equal to 0. Okay, I did that and solve. So if I divide by 5, this first one equals 0. And on this one, I'm going to subtract 2 and then divide by 5. So I get negative 2/5. And that's my answer. Okay, let's look at example 8. Example 8, First we check, does it equal 0? This does not, so I'm going to subtract 12x to move it to the other side. So I have 4x squared minus 12x equals 12x minus 12x is 0. Now it's equal to 0, so now step 1's good. Okay, next is to take out the GCF. Go ahead and factor it. So what is the GCF of 4x squared minus 12x? All right, it would be 4x. So we're going to take out 4x of everything. So let's just write that in, divide by 4x. Okay, 4 divided by 4 is 1, and then x squared divided by x is x. So you can put the 1x or just the x. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. The x's cancel out. All right, that's my factored form. So then it says set each factor equal to 0. Now solve. So divide by 4. So x equals 0. And add 3, so x equals 3. And that's my solution. Okay, on example 9, what do you need to do first before you can begin to solve? All right, you need to add it and get it equal to 0. So I'm going to add this 30x squared over. So I get 25x plus 30x squared equals negative 30x squared plus 30x squared is 0. Okay, now it equals 0. So that's good. So now what is my GCF? All right, it would be 5x. So I'm going to go ahead, and I like to switch colors just so I don't get it all jumbled here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out a 5x. And so we're going to find what's left for the other factor. So 25 divided by 5 is 5, and the x's cancel out to 1. 30 divided by 5 is 6, and it's positive, and then the x squared divided by x is just x. All right, so it's 5 plus 6x. So now set each factor equal to 0. When you solve, what are your two answers? All right, I divide by 5 and get 0. That's one answer. And I'd subtract the 5 and divide by 6. And so I get negative 5, 6. That's another answer. All right. So last but not least here on number 10, same thing, just keep practicing. Step 1, set it equal to 0. Okay, it's already equal to 0, so I'm ready to go to step 2. Step 2 is to factor. What's the GCF? All right, it would be 3x. So let's take the 3x out. All right, 9x squared divided by 3x. 9 divided by 3 is 3. X squared divided by x is x. Okay, negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. The x's simplify to 1. Now set each factor equal to 0. And what do you get for your two solutions? I'm going to divide by 3, and I'm going to get 0. I'm going to add 4 and divide by 3, and I get 4/3. So my answers are 0 and 4/3.